Welcome back to Talking Dragon Age, the show where I talk about Dragon Age. Today we're talking about an entity that serves as an optional boss fight in the Legacy DLC for DA2. I'm of course talking about what the Dwarves call Malvernis, the Pestilent One. Yeah, go ahead and add that to the list. Seriously guys? Half of these would be too many. Anyway, let's start off here with how you actually find him. First, going through the mountain pass, you'll come across 3 inscriptions that talk about him. They say he destroyed entire taigs and feasted upon dead dwarves. They say he turned everything into noxious waste and slime. Finally, he was imprisoned, at least partially, within an orb. Not much is said on how they did that other than the fact that he was chained by lyrium. He was so great a threat that a dwarf was chosen each generation to make the sacrifice of going to the surface to stand watch, ensuring that he doesn't escape. These were all written by a paragon, by the way. That should give you an idea of how important this is, if the destruction of entire taigs wasn't enough. Anyway, the inscriptions say that Malvernis would try to tempt his watcher to free him, but they must never give in. It mentions that the signs of his awakening would be a foul smell and the cadence of drums. Once Hawk goes inside the Carta's base and down some stairs, you can open a chest which has a glowing orb. One of your companions may make a comment about hearing drumming. So, of course, you take it back outside to a pillar that's there for some reason, and then you fight Malvernis. He has 2 forms. One is that of a masked humanoid figure in black robes, and the second is a spectral dragon. He raises spectral skeletons to fight you and has a wealth of other spells to hit you with. But he finally succumbs to your awesomeness and dies. Then the same thing happens to Corypheus. Ooh, wait. So, let's take a look at the information we have so far. Malvernis is an entity that spread pestilence, foulness, and poison wherever it went. The inscriptions say he destroyed entire taigs, turning them and the dwarves into slime. Based on the fact that he destroyed several taigs, I want to say that this all happened before the first blight. Now, the whole pestilence thing does resemble Darkspawn. However, we never really see them turning things into slime and waste as the inscriptions describe. It's possible that Malvernis is one of the sidereal magisters, but we can see that he's not deformed like the others. Though perhaps this is just a projection and his true form remains a mystery. That's possible, but I don't think so. I think this is a totally different entity. Although I do want to point out something about his name. Malvernis fought the dwarves. They are the ones who imprisoned him, they are the ones who wrote the inscriptions. But Malvernis does not sound like a dwarven word. I think it more closely resembles the Tevinter language. I mean, in Dwarven we have Atrast, Salroka, Amgaforn, Kalak, Partha, Mathas, Kalnath, Isana. In Tevin we have Soparati, Leitan, Amatis, Venhidis, not to mention names like Mayveris, Dorian, Calpurnia, Eramond, Denarius, whereas the Dwarves have Endrin, Balin, Pyral, Ogren, Gorim. Although I'd like to be, I'm not a linguist, but you've got to admit, each language has a distinct pattern, and Malvernis sounds more like it fits with Tevin rather than Dwarven. If this happened before or around the same time as the First Blight, back at the height of Tevinter's power, it could make sense that the Dwarves borrowed their translation of Pestilent One. Although the Dwarves did create the Common Tongue, which is what the inscriptions are written in, besides the word Amgaforn. So I guess it ultimately doesn't matter, though I wanted to bring this up for 2 reasons. 1, so I would have an excuse to talk about languages, because I love this sort of thing, and 2, so I could segue into the prison. There are a few possible scenarios here. I should note that both the Wardens and the Dwarves together built Corypheus' prison. I think the Dwarves built a majority of the structure, while the Wardens set the wards and other stuff. It should also be noted that Corypheus was imprisoned about 4 years after the First Blight ended. Anyway, scenario 1 is that they just happened to build it right next to the site of Amgaforn. Scenario 2 is that the orb was moved there after the prison was built, but based on the presence of these pillars with the inscriptions, I doubt that. Scenario 3 is that Malvernis came after the First Blight, and the Dwarves thought it would make sense to put it in or next to the existing prison. That's possible, but I'd still say that's unlikely. What's weird is that the orb was not put in the prison. Even if it came before, could they not have moved it? Surely it would be more secure. I mean, the prison was designed to let stuff come in, but not let anything out. Which, again, is weird because Malcolm Hawke was able to go in, reinforce the seals, and leave. Maybe the orb was in the prison before Legacy, but it was brought out sometime before we got there. At this point, I'm not even sure whether or not that's possible. So where are we at here? I feel like I've been all over the map so far. Okay, Malvernis is an entity that can take on the form of a shrouded humanoid and a spectral dragon. He has extremely powerful magic and destroyed entire dwarven taigs by turning them and their dead into noxious waste. He's repeatedly described as spreading pestilence and poison everywhere he goes, and even the stone itself was threatened by it. The dwarves were finally able to imprison him within an orb, chained by lyrium. Hawk releases him and seems to kill him. Now I want to talk about something I find peculiar. They keep referring to him as pestilent and foul. It brings to mind the codex entry for Fen'Harel the Dread Wolf. Here it says, "The Forgotten Ones were the gods of terror, malice, spite, and pestilence." Pestilence is a very specific word. Danish legends aren't totally accurate, but they're usually close, like Andrew's hunt actually being sacrifice, or Fen'Harel's trickery actually being rebellion. Terror, malice, and spite could easily be other things: fear, conquest, tyranny, hate, war, the list goes on. But pestilence is so specific. What else could it be? Sickness? Plague? My point is that maybe we fought a Forgotten One and didn't even know it. That would explain the spectral dragon ability. It would also explain the name not sounding dwarven. However, there is not much to back this up, it's just a suspicion. I'll probably talk more about this in my Forgotten Ones episode, but I also want to mention that maybe the Forgotten One associated with pestilence was a healer, rather than infector. I just wanted to put that out there in case it's not Malvernis. Okay, I think I'm about ready to wrap this up. So, Malvernis is an extremely powerful entity that may be a Forgotten One, maybe even by another name. He might be a demon, he might be a sidereal magister, he might be some twisted magical experiment gone wrong. We can't really say for sure, but I will say that if the might of the dwarves couldn't kill him, I find it unlikely that Hawk did. So I guess that's it for now, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, Tala Nadas.